Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Power Driven Podcast. Today, we kind of have Will came up with this because of a user or a guy who watched our podcast and said, you guys are talking over my head and I'm a car guy. So today we're going to try to talk in a language that people can understand and talk about why diesels are so awesome, why we're passionate about them, why they're better, what are some of the misconceptions that have been over the past, and hopefully we talk in a way that everybody can understand. So good luck, Meyer.
So kind of,
oh boy.
So kind of back to basics on why we choose diesel and why you should choose diesel power for your vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this whole discussion really starts in the 1970s. There's a little oil embargo thing and oil prices went through the roof.
Gas lines.
And so there was lines at the gas stations. And so in an effort to improve fuel economy, all of the OEMs quickly slammed out a diesel-powered, repowered gas. Like there's a 350 Chevy that Oldsmobile came out with that was like a gas engine that they made it diesel-powered. And these things were the slowest turd, most unreliable, poor starting, non-turboed,
poorly
engineered. And that stigma exists to this day that diesels are slow, poorly engineered turds. And they're not.
Yeah, the reality is there's, in the world of everything, diesel is king. Anything you have came to you by a diesel somehow, across the ocean, on a train. It's all from diesel
Like
power.
You go on a cruise ship, if gasoline was more efficient, the cruise ship would run on gasoline, but it runs on crude oil because heavy fuel oil is the most efficient way they found with boats to move them across the ocean. Trains, they're electric powered locomotive, but the electric is powered by a diesel generator on board.
Yeah.
So they've taken it a step further. They want a set RPM that the engine spins at where they can make the diesel engine as efficient as possible. And then they use power to control the electricity.
Yeah.
Semi-trucks?
So what? Yeah, well, that's obviously every semi-truck out there is diesel powered. We know this. But so this kind of goes back to your question. Why did the OEMs in the 70s decide we need to make a diesel for fuel economy? Why do they get better fuel mileage? What's even the reason that happens?
So the biggest factor, well, there's two big factors. One is compression ratio. Diesels operate a much, much higher compression ratio. And that inherently in any engineering design, high compression ratio equals high efficiency.
Yeah.
There's gains from compression. But you could do that on a gas engine. Theoretically, if you designed it perfect, you could raise the compression. Two, well, actually, there's two more besides that.
There's more. I'm just two reasons?
There's three main reasons. So the first one's compression ratio. The second one, I mean, you talked about that, is the throttling on a diesel versus a gas engine. Let's just start there.
Really nice. I remember years ago, my buddy had one of these crappy 6.5 naturally aspirated diesels, Blazer. It's a Blazer. And I remember it froze one night. And so we got some starting fluid and we pulled the air cleaner off and there was no carburetor. I was like, what the? There's nothing. There's just an open plenum to the air intake manifold. I was like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I had no idea. And so every gas engine is sucking air through a tiny straw at cruising speeds. Now, if wide open throttle, okay, that's fine. But you have a butterfly valve that closes off the air because that's how it meters power, that limits the amount of air that goes into that engine because it has to maintain an air-fuel ratio that's the same, pretty close all the time. So it has to meter air. And so when you're making very low power, that engine is sucking through a straw, and that's a pumping loss. So just the fact that you're having to think about it when you're pulling a trailer with a gasoline engine, you downshift and you let off the throttle and you let that engine suck through that throttle blade. And that's just the pumping losses that keeps your trailer going slow or decelerates your car.
So you let off the gas on your gasoline powered truck or car. When you let off the throttle and it slows down, that is the pumping loss of the engine sucking against that closed throttle blade.
While you drive at low throttle conditions because it has to meter the air. So it's not as bad as all the way off, but you're still having pumping losses that it's just a loss. That's all there is to it. It's just a loss because of that.
And a diesel, there is no throttle blade. It's wide open. Whatever the engine can consume, it can.
It gets it freely.
And back to the basics, the whole reason that can exist on a diesel versus a gas engine is a diesel can operate in a much wider air fuel ratio is what they call it. So you don't have to have the perfect balance of air and fuel to make the engine happy.
Just give it all
for a gas engine, very narrow window. Yeah. And so
let's put numbers on that. So gasoline, where are you operating in?
So cruising down the road at light throttle, they're about 14.7 parts air to 1 part fuel.
And that's by weight. And that's why it's not like 14 gallons of air for 1 gallon of fuel. So yeah, by weight, 14. And so what's like super lean and what's like super rich? Like where's your, like, you have to be in this window?
And so then a gas engine, when it's loaded heavy, they can't be at 14.7 because it'll ping and detonate. It needs to cool the cylinder off. And so they run excess fuel, which is another fuel economy loss on a gas engine when they're loaded heavy. And so they're actually more like 12.5 parts fuel to 1 part air. And the leanest I've ever
Parts
seen.
air to 1 part fuel. You said it backwards.
Yeah.
We get it.
12.5 parts air to 1 part fuel. So there's going to be less air versus the amount of fuel there versus the lean cruise. And then the leanest I've seen them's like 18-1 on like new cars. Most old cars, they never really go leaner than about 16-1. So they have a pretty tight window. Let's say 12.5-1 to about 16-1 is probably 90% of any gas powered. That's their operating range. Start adding turbos and boosts, they go even richer. They go like 11.5-1.
Yeah, to try to keep the engines alive.
Because boost makes more heat and stuff. A diesel, on the other hand,
yeah,
I think you can go as rich as probably 6-1 is probably about where they won't run anymore and it'll shut off. And you go as lean as like, what, 60-1?
I mean, who knows? We keep with nitrous and combine turbos. The leaner we go, the more power we make. I've heard of people saying around 30-1 is kind of where the power starts. You stop adding power.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way you throttle a diesel or control the power or your cruising speed is how much fuel you put in there.
Yeah.
So you only put in enough fuel to make enough power to go that fast. And so therefore you're going to gain some efficiency there. Where in a gas car, you're throttling it, controlling the air with a blade that's got to suck against, and then it delivers the precise amount of fuel it needs to burn that amount of air. A diesel, it doesn't care. It runs as much air as it can through the engine, and the amount of fuel creates the amount of power it's making.
So, I mean, a diesel, when you're cruising down the road, let's say you have an average truck, whatever, and you're towing a trailer or you're just driving the road, you're probably north of 20-1.
Oh yeah.
22, 24. I mean, you're north of 21.
I mean, it depends on what you're doing for sure. But I've kind of just guessed like between like the 25 to, I mean, you start pulling a grade, you can get down like to 20, maybe 18 if it's like heavily fueled. But yeah, it's living right there and it's great. And I feel like there's also an efficiency gain. Like we see, like when we put a bunch of nitrous in an engine, that's a lot of oxygen. You're adding oxygen to the burn. It's accelerant, but you're putting a lot of oxygen in there. The fact that we can operate so lean, just cruising down the road, now that means that diesel particle has a lot of extra air to be able to burn at will, and you're getting as much power out of it, that diesel, as you can. Whereas a gas, you're kind of limited to, I bet you'd be more efficient if you could be 18, 19, 20, but it just has all the issues of, pinging or whatever.
Yeah, detonation, things like that, the way the fuel burns, the flame front, it's just different. I mean, it is very different because gasoline has really tried, and this is how they're probably getting 18-1 is with direct injection. That's kind of a newer thing. The diesels have had a long time. We probably should talk about that for a minute too. But with direct injection in gasoline, it's helped, but even just the properties of the fuel is still different. And so you can't burn it the same way you can burn a diesel. Okay. Also, another reason diesels get better fuel mileage is the fuel itself is more energy dense. There's more BTUs in a gallon of diesel than
So that's kind of like the third reason we're going to talk about. And the energy density, the way they measure fuel is by BTU, and that's how much heat energy it has. So maybe Meyer could look this up really quick, but a gallon of gasoline has less BTUs or energy per gallon than a gallon of diesel. And so I believe off the top of my head, there's about a 12% increase, but maybe I'm a little off on there. Isn't diesel BTUs like 131,000 or something? So
according to Google AI overview, a gallon of diesel is roughly equivalent to 138,000 BTUs, whereas a gallon of gas is roughly equivalent to 122,500 BTUs.
So 122 versus 138. So you're like 7%?
No, so 10% of 100, 10,000.
That's like 12%.
Yeah,
12%.
Yeah.
So there's a 12%, you could say, efficiency gain purely because there's more energy in a gallon of diesel.
Yeah.
Now, if you pay more for diesel at the pump,
it may offset
that gets kind of offset and negated. And maybe that's where my 7%, my brain, because diesel was about 7% more at the time when I did it a long time ago. I don't know why I have that number in my head. So it's probably what the net efficiency is.
That was also Google overview. So you never really know. But yeah, either way, it is more powerful.
So it's just like if you have like a wood stove and you burn hardwood versus burning some really light pine, a piece
Yeah.
of hardwood or oak is going to produce more heat
More dense, yeah.
in your fireplace and burn longer than a piece of pine. Or if you burn coal, if you're really old school, man, coal burns, it's very dense. It's like a freaking rock, you know? And I've burned coal a couple times when I was a kid, and I was amazed at how long a couple lumps of coal will burn in the wood stove box versus
I've never burned coal.
versus
That's kind of
firewood.
Yeah, same.
I've
leave
rolled
it
it.
to Will.
Well, I mean, I don't know. My dad one day showed up with a load of coal in the bed of his truck. He's like, I got some coal, kids. We're going to burn in the wood stove this winter. I'm like, sweet. And we would start the fire with the wood and put a couple lumps of coal in there and
Burn
you'd,
for hours.
It definitely has a little sulfury smell if you don't have a good drafting chimney. But other than that, yeah, coal burns. It's like amazing. As a kid, you're like, this black rock that's heavy and dense looks like a piece of lava rock, and it's just burning. You're like, this is
awesome.
wild.
freaking cool. So, yeah, coal's much more energy dense than firewood, and
yeah,
it's the same principle.
So those are the kind of like the main reasons why a diesel gets better fuel economy than a gasoline, apples for apples. Oftentimes diesels are put in heavier vehicles, so you kind of lose some of that advantage. I mean, weight does matter.
Mm-hmm.
Another reason I think they get, I know, another reason they do so well, like in a work application, is the RPM range where they make the power.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to say you need something that makes 300 horsepower and you have a gasoline, naturally aspirated engine, even a large one, you got to kind of wring it out to get there. You got to have some serious RPM. With that RPM comes a lot of fuel to spin that fast, where a diesel engine can make that at pretty much any RPM you want, as long as you're in the working range of the turbo.
And so in the quest for fuel economy on gas engines, they've geared the transmissions and the axles such that the engine is at, let's say, 2,000 RPM, maybe a little below that at your cruising speed. When you go put a load at 2,000 RPM, a gas engine doesn't have very much torque to pull the load. And so when you floor it, it'll downshift a gear or two and rev it up there to 4,000, 4,500 to go. Well, when you're towing, just as a human, your human nature, you're used to hearing your truck or car at 2,000 RPM cruising down the road. When you floor it and it feels like it's on rev line revving up there, you feel like you're being hard on the engine.
Mm-hmm.
And so people inherently don't like to do that. Like my wife has a Yukon 6.2 liter, LT engine, all this fancy direct injection stuff. At the end of the day, when I'm pulling a little trailer or going up the hill fast, I cringe a little when I floor it and it smacks 5,500 RPM, where that same Yukon, I've test driven the diesel versions of them. And in the diesel version, it chugs right up that hill at 2,000 RPM and you feel like there's nothing going on. And so you could say part of the quest for fuel economy has trained us as humans to not like RPM and gas engines.
Mm-hmm.
And a diesel, you just feel comfortable laying in the throttle if it's chugging along at low RPM.
This might be a little bit much for a bit back to basics podcast, but maybe I would be interested in your quick thoughts. Why is it that diesels don't make why is it that diesels make the torque that they do and they don't have to downshift, and whereas gassers can't make that torque and they have to rev up in order to get the power? Now,
I don't think this is 100% gas versus diesel. I think this is turbocharged versus naturally aspirated.
Obviously, if they could just do it and make a 3,000 RPM gas engine, they would. So what is the reasoning? I mean, I guess my guess, I think a big part of it is that diesels generally have a longer stroke versus bore diameter. And with that, you have limited valve size and there's limited technology in the head or whatever. So it doesn't flow. Mm-hmm. It's not flowing enough to be able to really be efficient or do much of anything at 5,000 RPM in factory form. Like there's a lot of misconception
and we're talking like pickup truck working diesels, although they're going more that way. But you get like some of these hot rod, like European diesel cars, some of these V10s and stuff. Mm-hmm. They have shorter stroke and big bore, exactly opposite what you're saying. Okay. They've designed them to make high RPM power, and they do work better there. Mm-hmm. So there is, but in the current design that we're used to, semi trucks, pickup trucks, most American diesel stuff that we at least have experience with here.
Long stroke,
and smaller bore size, which means less valve area, which means less airflow, and a lower flowing head cannot sustain power at high RPM as well.
And that's what I was kind of getting into. I mean, when I grew up, I thought that, oh, diesel burns slow. That's what you hear. Everyone tells you, oh, diesel burns slow. And that's why they can't burn fuel fast enough at 5,000 RPM to operate. That's why you make the power at 2,000. Well, working here, I realize that's not true. Diesel burns ridiculously fast.
Yep.
That's definitely not the problem. And really the reason is,
I mean, let's unravel that a little bit though. Where did people come up with diesel burns slow? I mean, think about, you're just an average guy in your yard burning weeds. Why do you think diesel burns slow versus gasoline?
I mean, if you've ever like lit a puddle on fire, like it's like, I can see why my engine doesn't like 4,000. You're sitting there with a striker trying to get it to go.
You can't burn a puddle of diesel unless you hold the torch on it for a long time.
I remember
gasoline. You might be losing your eyebrows.
I remember my dad did that demonstration for me. We had a gallon of gas. He's like, hey, check this out. He puts a gallon of gas and throws a spark at it and just goes up in flame. I mean, I'm like 6 years old, so I'm like, hey, nice. And then he's like, because he just bought like his truck, or he showed him, like, telling me about his truck or whatever, and diesel, and like, what's the difference? And then he took a little bit of diesel, put it on the ground, and threw a spark at it, and just went out like a match at it, and it went out. I'm like, how does that burn? How does your truck run?
So we believe that's probably where this misnomer that diesel burns slow came from, is people playing with non-atomized, not finely misted, not in a combustion chamber that's hot, full of boost.
Yeah.
And
that, I mean, that's another thing too that I think about. Like, I think we're getting past basics, but we'll say this and we'll reel it back in.
We'll do our best.
But on a spark plug engine, you got your spark that starts the flame front, and it's starting there, and it's having to travel through the cylinder to reach everything. Whereas diesel, it's not. That's another misconception that that diesel ignites off compression. It doesn't ignite off compression. It ignites off heat.
Right.
There's an auto ignition temperature, and so when you compress air, the air gets hot. Once it gets over the auto ignition temperature of the diesel,
which is around 500 degrees.
The diesel lights off. Well, instead of having one spark that has to start a flame front, you have the whole cylinder is like ready. So the moment that the injector starts firing, all the fuel that's in the bowl is like, yep, we're ready to go. And it changes a little bit with like the whatever.
The fuel droplet size. And
yeah. And I wonder, is that why, I mean, I haven't even like delved into this, but is that the reason you can have detonation in a gasoline where you don't have it in diesel? Because the flame front still comes from the injector, right? As it's injecting. So you still have a flame front and it's still traveling across the cylinder, but it's all, why doesn't a diesel, because you can't even direct inject, and you can still detonate a direct injected gasoline car, where the diesel is not an issue.
The little misnomer I've recently learned on direct injected, they don't really inject the fuel as the piston's coming up. Most direct injection injects the fuel as the piston's going down on the intake stroke.
On the gas, so it's just like
it's kind of like normal. It's just mixing in the cylinder. It didn't get heated up over the valve.
They don't have near the injection pressure we do. They probably couldn't even put it in at that high. I mean,
so there.
Yeah, that's a good point, huh?
Yeah,
you'd have to be 4,000 pounds of injection pressure to get it to go in.
Yeah, so there aren't really gas engines that I'm aware of that inject right as the piston's coming up to top dead center. They might spray a little way up, but most of them try to spray the fuel as the piston's going down.
So what's the advantage of direct injection?
It doesn't get heated up in the intake track a little bit.
You're just trying to keep the fuel cooler so it doesn't auto
and
ignite.
They found from peak power port injection, it actually on gas engines makes more power when you're chasing like max horsepower per cubic inch.
Port injection.
So it's like, in fact, a lot of them, they go off and direct, and it's weird.
So we're probably just turning to direct, because a lot of them have both direct injection and port injection.
And on your consumer grade cars, they go to direct injection when they're loaded heavy. But in a race application, you take like a Coyote, for example, 5-liter Coyote, they have port injection and direct injection. And right around, let's say 25% throttle, they go to mostly direct injection. They turn off the port. And then sometimes they'll bring the port back on the top end because they need enough fuel quantity. So they mix both. But like if you're building like a race Coyote, they get rid of the direct injection and go all port the whole way. And they say it makes more power. But anyway, we're getting like off in the weeds, but the fuel takes up airspace. So you can't get as much air in there if you're putting fuel in the port. So from an OEM car level, they can make more power safely with direct injection because more airflow gets into the cylinder because fuel is not displacing air.
Yeah.
But on a race thing, the better homogenation or the better mixture of air and fuel allows them on these big power things to actually make more power safely without detonation and pre-ignition stuff. So yeah, we're getting way in the weeds.
Yeah.
But yeah,
sure.
back to basics. Let's
I
talk
want to
about
get back
the dynamics.
to this, the turbochargers. We're talking about the low end torque and the slow burn, stuff like this. Because I do feel like a gasoline engine could do way better than it does if it had turbochargers. Examples, the little EcoBoost you drive around. That has great low RPM power, especially for the size of engine that's
Excellent.
on.
It does rolling burnouts very easily when the traction control is disabled because it's got a bad wheel speed sensor.
So like I said, the diesel is super nice because if you ever look at a diesel dynograph and you're familiar looking with dynographs from gasoline engines, you're like, what is wrong with this dynograph? Especially from like the factory, because it's going to go up and be a flat line of horsepower for a long time across that graph. It's like, it's very fake looking, not natural.
Yeah. I mean, if you're used to gas where it's just basically, it makes more and more and more and more and more power until you're too scared to rev it any higher. Like, I mean, not all gas.
Right. But it
Graphs
peaks
look
and then
like that.
slowly falls off and you're done.
Yeah. Whereas diesel, it's like, yeah, it's peaking right there in the meat, right where you need it.
Yeah.
And like, I was actually thinking about this, speaking of power bands, I was thinking about this the other day, like thinking about how wide a diesel power band really is. Like, it sounds like, oh, it's a very tight power band, but really when you look at it in percent, there's a huge percent. Like, I mean, if you can tow a trailer, if you can be sitting there between 1600 and 2600 RPM, that's, if you have a 3000 RPM red line, that's 1000 RPM of a 3000 RPM window, which is idle in there. So it's even less. So it's like whatever, but
2000, like 50%.
Yeah. You have like half of the engine's capable window is a great power band. You can sit there and work it in. Whereas gas, like, yeah, you can tow it 6,000 and 4,000 and 2,000, but 2,000 is kind of meh, and 5,000, you don't want to sit there forever.
Right.
And so like the fact that a diesel, you can just like, you can live 16 to 26 and it's a-okay. It'll do that all day long, regardless of the power level. Like, or 16 is a little low to be making a lot of power, but either way, like, that's pretty impressive. Like, I know my tow truck, like I can, if there's like a couple speeds, like normally I have 2 gears I could be in, like high or low. Well, there's a couple like 70 miles an hour. I can be in 6th, I can be in 5th, and I can be in 4th. That's 3 possible gears for 1 mile an hour. Like,
and they all tow great.
And they all tow awesome.
Yeah.
Like, and if your same truck had a Hemi in there would only be 1 gear that would make enough torque to keep that load moving at that speed, enough torque and horsepower. And so you're going to be in 4th gear revving, and 5th gear, it probably barely won't have enough power to pull it. In 6th gear, you'll lose speed because it does not have enough power
and
to maintain speed.
You could be in 3 gears in a gas, but if you start pulling a grade, you're going to have to go to the lower gear. And when you're on flat ground, you don't want to be 5,000 RPM. So you're forced to change your gears all the time, depending on what your load is, what your grade is, what your whatever is. Diesel, it'll sit there at 2,800. It doesn't care.
Basically uncovered a 4th reason on the diesel versus gas is the torque that you get versus gas. So if you get let's say you get a typical gas engine that makes 350 horsepower, it's probably going to make about 350 foot-pounds of torque. And the torque is what's twisting. And so the more torque you have, the more gear it can pull. Basically, it can run at a lower RPM and put in work. A diesel is usually 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. You have a 350 horsepower diesel, you probably have 750 foot-pounds of torque. Double that.
Yeah, so you're in lower gear and still twist it.
And so you're getting the power, the twist at low speed, like we're talking like a 10-liter race engine type torque,
So I want to talk about that more still, the turbochargers. Why does a gasoline engine have to rev to 6,000 RPM to get the power that diesel makes at 2,000 RPM? Now, this is a lot of you guys already know this, and yes, it's turbocharger, but why does that actually work? So your typical gasoline engine, Coyote, LS, Hemi, whatever you have, is determined, the airflow is determined by RPM. There's nothing pushing it in, it's sucking it in through that throttle blade. Atmospheric pressure, wherever you live, your altitude determines the atmospheric pressure. That's pushing the air in the engine as it's rotating.
You got anywhere from like 11 to 15 pounds of pressure,
depending where you're at, and
14.7.
the weather systems and all that kind of stuff. And so you are limited by that amount pushing the air into your engine. So the only way to get more air through it is to spin it faster. And so that's a huge limitation on almost all gasoline engines until, somewhat recently, more and more turbo engines are coming out, where the diesels, have had turbos for a long time. Like we're talking since the 80s. 1980s, that's who knows, but a long time. And so with those turbos, you can get as much airflow as your Hemi's taking in at 6,000 RPM. We can push that in at 2,000 RPM. That's why you can get this great power at these lower levels, is the turbocharger makes it possible. And so
it
now,
magnifies the engine. It doubles or triples the displacement. so to
turbos
speak,
are
of it.
multipliers. It multiplies the displacement of your engine. If you got a 2-to-1 pressure ratio, your engine is now, your 3.5 liters now a 7 liter. So your little 3.5 EcoBoost engine, as far as the airflow is known, is bigger than like a Coyote, because you can push atmosphere through it, especially if you start doing modifications.
Yeah, when they do these towing tests with a 5-liter Coyote or even the 7.3 Godzilla engine, 7.3 liter gas engine versus a 3.5, the EcoBoost, especially you get a little altitude going there, you get a little above sea level, the EcoBoost will beat it in a towing test.
Yeah.
3.5 liters.
Mm-hmm.
But if you multiply or turbocharge the 5-liter 7.3, you're multiplying a bigger engine. So a turbo literally multiplies the engine you have. So the bigger engine you start with, you're multiplying a bigger number. So that's great. That's why semi-engines are so big. But think about it. A 7.3 Godzilla, gas engine,
not known for super good fuel economy. They're okay for modern, but they're still not
half as big as your over-the-road 15-liter semi-truck engines. Could you put 2 7.3 Godzilla engines in a semi-truck and have it do anything remotely close to what a 15-liter semi-truck engine can do?
No, absolutely not.
close.
Yeah, you're so far away from that.
And the downside I've seen as an EcoBoost owner, tester, whatever, is it gets great fuel economy when it is empty and I'm going at, let's say, highway speed limit 80 or less. It actually gets decent fuel economy. And I believe that's why they came out with that turbo 3.5, was to save, fuel economy versus the big V8. However, if I put a trailer behind that thing, it sucks fuel. I'd be lucky to get 10 miles per gallon pulling a trailer that my diesel that normally only gets 16 miles to the gallon, my diesel gets 15 miles per gallon pulling that trailer that the EcoBoost gets 10 miles per gallon.
Yeah.
But the EcoBoost empty gets almost 20. And it's the same trailer. It's
really goes back to your enrichment, right? Because now you have a load, so you can't run these good air-fuel ratios that keeps it alive. In order to keep the EcoBoost alive,
with that load, it has to be running rich.
Super fat to keep it alive, because now you have boost. It's a double whammy, because now you're enriching it because of the boost, and then you're enriching it because the turbos put so much more heat into it. It's probably worse than a naturally aspirated engine at a certain load.
And I think people honestly have tested that. The big V8s get better fuel economy towing heavy than the 3.5 liter turbo EcoBoost does.
Because you're fighting two things, the heat from the turbo and just the heat from the engine itself. And so, if you're going to get an EcoBoost, which I think they're fun things, but it's a trade-off. I wouldn't get one for a towing truck, but if I had it for a truck that I towed a trailer once in a while, you'll probably in the end be ahead, because most of your miles are probably not towing.
Yeah, most of it's empty running around.
So you're probably gonna get worse mileage towing, but I don't think anybody's buying an EcoBoost forward thinking this is my tow truck. It's a truck I may tow with occasionally. Okay, fine.
Mm-hmm.
But turbos do make a huge difference, and that's why your EcoBoost, like I say, does outperform these larger engines.
And you don't pay that penalty with the diesel, the turbo diesel,
right?
Because it does not get enriched when it's loaded heavy. It's happy.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the load makes the turbo work harder and makes more boost and makes it run even leaner under the same condition, the same amount of fuel. So technically, you're getting more gain or more power production out of the same amount of fuel as you get more boost in there than otherwise. So honestly, as the diesel gets loaded heavier, theoretically,
it gets more efficient for the pounds of weight you have to move down the road. The heavier you are, the more efficient your engine becomes, which is really weird. Because it's the opposite in gasoline. But you're right, and we've seen this on the dyno when as we've been playing a lot with like turbos, compound turbos, nitrous. The leaner we get, the more power we make for a given amount of fuel.
Mm-hmm.
We don't change the fuel. Like on the Cummins cart, we picked up over 500 horsepower without changing the fuel, just by going leaner, leaner, leaner. And we didn't even limit that. That's just where we stopped. There may be more there. Now, this is a pretty radical build for sure, and I have lots of fuel. But to pick up 500 horsepower, this is over compound turbos, which is a lot of air. So, the diesels, like say, there's so much excess energy in fuel in general because of how efficient engines are. Like, was it 30% is a diesel? 30% of the heat goes to moving your stuff. The rest of it is lost in heat.
Yep.
Or 30%.
It's about a third. So about 33 moves you, a third goes to the cooling system, about a third goes out exhaust.
And a little bit worse on the gasoline stuff. So the more you can skew those towards your benefit by getting the engine more efficient via more air in the cylinder. It's like you say, adding load, adding weight. Any guy who's driven a diesel knows it's like, oh, my turbo just makes a lot of boost. Oh, I'm making crazy boosts for all of a sudden. It's like, they just like load, man. It's just whatever it is. So they get more efficient. So hence another reason why diesels tow everything on the planet Earth and not gasoline engines if you're using it to make money.
And that's why all the over-the-road trucks are semi trucks are diesel powered and not some big gas engine.
Because they're pinching like if they get a 0.1 mile per gallon gain,
big difference.
They're celebrating. Like that's a big deal for them. Like these million-mile motors, that adds up.
I mean, back in the 70s, you could get motorhomes and stuff that were gas powered. You know, I remember I worked for a guy that had a 440 in his motorhome. He's like, yeah, she gets 6 miles per gallon. And I'm like, this is like a little 29-foot, not very big of a motorhome thing, 6 miles per gallon. And I'm just like, I could tow 2 of those on a flatbed trailer with a modern diesel truck and still get better than 6 miles per gallon, including the truck and the trailer weight on top of all that. And they'd be up high in the air. I mean, it's crazy how, much efficiency the modern diesels. But I think while we're at the basics, we should talk a little bit about the drawback of modern diesels. Like why some people have them and they're, you get a brand new model diesel, super powerful, super awesome.
Well, we can even go let's start even before that. We've obviously made the case why diesel is so much better than gasoline for any kind of work. Why isn't everything a diesel? Well, for one, the engine's expensive. That compression ratio you talked about a while ago, is super, super high. It requires some pretty heavy duty parts to live up to that kind of stuff.
So the cylinder wall's thicker, the rods are thicker. Every part of the engine is more robust to handle that big, because if you're making that much torque, you're making a lot of cylinder pressure, there's a big bang going on in the engine. The more torque, the more bang in the engine, we'll call it.
If you were to sit side by side a 350 cubic inch small block Chevy rod next to a 359 cubic inch Cummins rod.
Yeah, it's like comparing your gas rod to like a pit bike rod. Yeah. Like it's that different.
It's that much different.
We had a coworker that put a set of those rods in our parts washer, and I was coincidentally rebuilding my engine, and so I put my rods in the parts washer, and I opened the door. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what are these? Like some pit bike rod?
If you haven't seen rods, it's like comparing a 2x4 to a 2x12.
Yeah,
I mean it's like. They're like not even
a furring strip to a 2x12.
A furring strip to a 4x4.
It's like ridiculous. I was like, what kind of small like engine is this from? It's like, oh, it's a LS. I'm like, holy crap. Like it's a big difference.
Yeah.
You get a diesel piston, they're really long and heavy. The piston itself is just massive and heavy.
The piston pin.
Yeah, everything. Everything is so heavy. Yeah.
The rings are thicker and heavier. There's all kinds of stuff on there. That's also why so many guys like us have such great luck. You could say hot rodding diesels is they do have a very robust engine and they're already factory turboed.
Yeah.
So they're just begging for more turbo and more fuel and it's there. Where a lot of gas engines, they're kind of designed just to do that. You put a turbo on them. Yeah. You might be able to put 5 or 6 pounds of boost in them, but eventually.
And the nice thing about especially specifically the Cummins platform is it was not designed for a pickup truck. It's a medium duty application engine. And so these things are designed to go so many miles. There's so much overhead built into them. Okay, I'll take a couple 100,000 miles off the service life of the engine for doubling the power. I only got 400,000 miles in this one. My bad. It's like there's so much built in, and they're designed to carry so much weight that that's just kind of a lucky, like your European diesels are probably designed for cars. You probably don't have that much overhead in them, but they still do have quite a bit of overhead in them because any diesel has to be built very robust. And if it can handle, I guess I'd say one of the nice things about diesel is it handles the torque at low RPM. It makes all that torque, anyone, European or this, they make torque at a low RPM. You make that same torque number at double the RPM, you just doubled your power, but you really didn't double the stress on the engine. So if you can fix your tune or do some modifications to make that same torque at a high RPM, which we do a lot here, all of a sudden power goes way high. And you really haven't stressed the engine much more because the torque is still the same. And that's the forces the engine sees as the actual torque numbers. So anyway, diesels for the win.
No, they're great. I will say one disadvantage to a diesel, just like talking from like a daily driven standpoint, they take longer to warm up. Like because I mean, especially like you get your smaller car diesels. Like I have a TDI, and so it's better, but it's still not nearly as fast as a gas engine because that gas engine, it's throttle blading. You said like 33% of the heat goes out the tailpipe, where Like when you got a throttle blade that's like starving the air going into the engine, now that air, like if you had half as much air with the same amount of heat in it, that means that air is twice as hot now. So if you have a throttle blade that's restricting the air going into the engine, now your exhaust temps are way high. I mean, we've all started a gas engine for 30 seconds and like you can't touch those manifolds. It's stupid hot.
Yeah.
Well, that's there warming up your cooling system, getting the cooling going, get your heater going. It's really nice. Well, a diesel is just full bore as much air as possible. So I mean, you can start a diesel
so it's
engine.
Diluted that heat in the exhaust stream and everything.
Yeah, you're idling with 200-degree
exhaust temperature.
Exhaust temperatures, maybe 250, like first startup on a cold day. And yeah, your cooling system does not warm up fast. And especially like these tow trucks where we have a huge cooling system to start with, like all that mass, all that metal that we talked about in order to make everything survive, you got to heat it all up. And so it definitely takes a little bit longer to warm up. Whenever I drive like my wife's car, I'm like, oh man. Like not only does she have a fire seat heater, but the vents start blowing hot before you can get out of the block.
6.2 all aluminum engine, it warms up pretty fast.
It's pretty nice at that. But yeah, and so that's one disadvantage for sure. And then like just diesels being cold blooded like that. I mean, the exhaust, especially if you have like an emission system in there, like if you just daily drive your truck 1 mile, a couple miles every day, that you're not putting any real heat through the engine. You're not burning out all that soot and everything that's going to accumulate in there. And now you're going to end up plugging your stuff. Like even older, like a 12 valve, you get these grandpa trucks, they start clogging up the like catalytic converter and you have to like hot rod them or something to try to get it to clear itself out. Just so it can actually breathe again, because like all those cold starts and just never really getting the system hot enough to burn off, it adds up and ends up clogging things.
So, I mean, we don't want to get into politics, but I will say diesel emissions are more visible out the tailpipe. The soot is easy. And so I feel like there's a high likelihood that they were disproportionately targeted by emission standards because you could see it. You see a semi drive away, you see a poof, people are like, oh my gosh, bad, we must regulate that. Yeah. Gas car blows away. They have to be way, way mistuned to make visible smoke. You can make them visibly smoke, but not. But as far as the actual amount of, you could say, emissions coming out of the tailpipe, a gas engine looks, I would say, 3 times cleaner than a diesel at the same amount of emissions. And so they've been targeted very heavily with emissions. And so one of the downsides of modern diesels is they have strapped these things down with emission systems. I've heard upwards of $12,000 of the cost of a new truck now. Maybe it's even 15 now. $1,000 is just on emissions components. So they're expensive to buy a new one because they've added a whole bunch of, you could say, scrubbers and air cleaners and particulate filters. And
yeah, you've already had the most expensive engine because it's heavy, it's large, has by far the most sophisticated fuel system. I mean, these modern engines, I mean, what, 30-something thousand PSI now from the factory. I mean, that's incredible pressures. That's the fuel pressure going in your engine is over 30,000 PSI when you're like really getting after it. I mean, the gasoline was 4,000 if you're hot rodding like a direct injection. So the fuel system's incredibly expensive. The turbo, they come turbocharged. They come with intercoolers. You already have all the components that diesels come with are expensive that they just don't exist on a gasoline engine. And now you're adding another 15 grand worth of exhaust components. These trucks are so expensive. They're so expensive.
And then to make matters worse, a lot of those emission systems are designed to work well when a truck is loaded, heavy, working hard, making that big exhaust temperature and stuff. If it's daily driven and putted around, most of the people I see that have emission system problems in their trucks, they're daily driving it 2 miles. It doesn't even warm up. They shut it off. They hardly ever haul with it. And they just start having issues with the emission system not working right. It doesn't like the short tripping. Yeah. So one argument you could say for a modern gas engine in a pickup truck, for example, if you're daily driving it and short tripping it, man, the gas engine, it doesn't care if it, barely gets up to temp, as long as it gets hot enough to burn the water out of the oil once in a while. They are simpler engines. And, I mean, that's about all I could really say on that. I mean, they still have emission systems on them as well, but
they do get as robust. But their exhaust is hot right from the start because they're limited to those air fuel ratios. So they have hot exhaust. Even this idling is hot. Like say that with the diesels not having that limitation, the air fuel ratios, like he's saying, your exhaust is cold. I mean, as far as your exhaust system knows, it's cold.
Oh yeah.
And it may not be hard to get warm driving around. Where that gasoline engine, it's gonna be hot no matter what because you're at that 14.
Yeah, it's always going to be 1,000 degrees or something.
No matter what.
It's burned at that air fuel ratio.
So even though they have those exhaust components, even in gasolines, they are always getting the heat to burn it out for the most part. I mean, sure, it's good to hot rod once in a while, I'm sure, but way less of a concern than it is in a diesel because of the temperatures coming out of the exhaust. So,
I mean, a couple other things. Diesel engines typically have more oil capacity, so oil changes are going to be a little more expensive. Generally, they have pretty long oil change intervals, although they've been bumping that up on gas cars too, but they've also been bumping up the oil capacity of gas cars. So you're kind of losing some of that advantage gas has there. I'm trying to think what other little issues you have with.
Really, the modern day diesel, the big problem is the exhaust system, the exhaust components. It's been illegal for a long time, but those who get rid of those, delete their trucks and whatnot, they've had remarkable success. And it's just unfortunate.
That's probably why so many of those people do delete them, it fixes so many problems.
So many problems and expensive repairs in the future. And so, but yeah, that's the world we live in for now. Hopefully, see what happens. But right now, I know there's lots of buzz out there, but you still cannot legally delete your truck. And don't call me to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to think about it. But yeah, so that's why we do love these older trucks. But I mean, the reality is the new trucks are pretty stinking nice.
Yeah.
Creature comforts, those seat heaters, those screens, those.
Yeah. It's ridiculous what they're throwing in the trucks now, just with all the little doodads and gadgets and automatic mirror flipping, flip out and flip in, and just heated and cooled. There's a lot of systems in there. There's a lot of.
I think a high-end truck today, it's got to be more luxurious than a freaking Rolls Royce from 1995. I'm way cooler stuff, way more stuff. Maybe 2005 even. Honestly.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's ridiculous how they thought of everything. You can connect to your truck with your phone. What? Not radio, but see parameters and stuff. It's wild.
They really are amazing what they've done, given the constraints that's been put on the manufacturers. And
now, if you're moving away from trucks, just diesel versus gas, you start getting into some of these commuter cars. Most of the diesel versions do get better fuel economy than the gas components. Yep. So that's the main allure to some people. You get some of the European, the BMWs and stuff. They feel like a hot rod with the diesel. They're taking advantage of the torque, and they've kind of designed them for a little more high RPM power. And so some of the European diesel cars are quite snappy and fast. And honestly, you get a hot rodded European car, the gas engine, they have problems because they're kind of on the ragged edge tuned, and it's hard to get a European gas performance car over 100,000 miles. There are a ton of BMW and Mercedes diesel performance cars well over 100,000 miles just chugging along. Because of those robust engine components, they do go the distance. So if you want a long-term daily driver fuel economy, the diesel's there. If you want a long-term hot rod daily driver in a car, the diesels are they're doing really good. They're a hard
I have a
argument to make against. So
I have a pretty good example of that. I have a 2008 GTI and I have a 2012 TDI, both a 2.0 motor in a Volkswagen.
Both turbocharged.
Yep. So they're 2.0 turbocharged.
And they're factory turbos.
Yep. And they're both factory. They're basically bone stock. The GTI has an exhaust because it fell off at one point. The GTI got 29 miles a gallon going down to Vegas and back. And then I just took the TDI and it got 42. So both pretty good.
Yeah.
Definitely
One's
that
better.
diesel.
But they're essentially the same vehicle as far as the shell or the wrapper that you're driving in.
It's the same.
Same nut behind the wheel driving them.
Same. Cruise control can go hard, but yeah. No, I was like, dang.
Which one would win in a drag race? The GTI.
I think the GTI would.
So the gas one's a little faster in that, but the TDI is probably not tuned or anything. So
it's if you're drag racing, the GTI would win. But again, back to diesel torque, the torque of the TDI, it didn't downshift a single time coming up here. They're both turbocharged vehicles, but somehow that the TDI, the diesel, had just more torque. It just was able to pull every grade.
At highway speed with no downshift.
It was great. The GTI would have had to downshift once or twice. Not a big deal, but it would have.
It is a big deal.
Downshifting, not about that. I think someone said that we need to make a shirt about downshifting is for someone else.
Now, if you put a
Yes.
tow hitch on both cars and you had to pull a, let's say, 2,000-pound trailer,
the
do you think the
would-
diesel would destroy it then?
I don't know, because horsepower, like that's going back to basics. People think like, oh, torque isn't like horsepower is not what you use to pull trailers. Torque is what you use. Horsepower is the amount of work done
over time.
And so if you have something that makes more horsepower, it can pull a trailer faster. Period. Like you have more power, you have more horsepower, you have more power being created, you can pull a trailer, you can do something faster.
But there's a caveat on that. Where does that gas engine make peak horsepower?
4,000, 5,000 RPM.
And that diesel makes peak
the
horsepower.
red line's at 4,000.
But it makes peak power at 3. And so to utilize that extra power in your scenario, you have to be up there at 4,000
have to
plus
downshift.
RPM
Yep. If you were-
downshift to utilize that power.
So yeah, as an example, if you put a 2,000-pound trailer on both those cars, otherwise, basically identical, just the fuel type, if you were allowed to just floor it and let the transmission go up to downshift and you were redlining on both, the GTI would pull away. If you were locked at top gear, 6th gear, whatever it is, and so that's 25-ish, 100 RPM, the TDI would pull away. Because at that RPM, the TDI is making more torque. And if it's making more torque at the same RPM, that's more horsepower. In order to get at the higher horsepower of the gas engine, it has to downshift. And that's why, we've talked about before with diesels like towing and how ridiculous it is. Like the fact that it can make like these tow trucks we're using can make 600-700 horsepower just sustained, and then also do it at that 2,000 RPM to where we're pulling grades with trailers and we don't even have to downshift.
Right.
Like gas engines wouldn't be able to pull that grade, at least not any like in a decent tow truck, but also it would have to downshift to even get close.
I have pulled, it's been years since I've towed anything decent with a gasoline truck, but years ago I did tow a trailer, which by my standards now would be quite small.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was fine. It was a paraplane trailer. So it was even aerodynamic, it had like a cone nose. And I towed it with a 6-liter gas engine. And I can't even imagine towing with gasoline engines. I mean, it'd be so frustrating.
I towed an empty car trailer, like a 20-foot, not car trailer, but like a 20-foot, like it's actually your trailer, you know this, but I towed it with your old car and it was terrible. I had to tow it up to Duck Creek because someone broke down with a trailer. So I had to like do the dual tandem thing to try to get it up there. And yeah, it was like, wow, how do people do this? This is terrible.
And that was life for years, man. You had the 350 Chevy versus the Ford, and they had the big block Chevy and the big block Ford, and you thought they were awesome and stuff. And then all of a sudden the Cummins and the Power Stroke 7.3 arrived and they were gone. Nobody cared about them anymore. They just died.
So my best gasoline towing story ever, Todd was involved in this. We're towing the junker drag truck down to Texas for the NHRDA World Finals. And we're down there and my tow truck, my 12-valve Cummins, breaks a push rod. And it sounds like the engine is coming apart. It's boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, this thing's dead. I can't do it anymore. It's going to window the block. And so I pull over, unhook the trailer, and I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm in Texas. I'm like over 1,000 miles from home and my tow truck's broken, but my in-laws live there, my father-in-law, and he had this Ram 1500 gas truck.
Nope.
And I was just like, oh, I know. I'll pull my car trailer with my, at that time, about 5,500 pound race truck on it. So it's probably 7,500 pounds. I'm going to pull this 7,500 pound trailer
on flat ground
in Texas, basically sea level, with this Ram 1500 truck. And so I get to my in-laws' house. I get his pickup truck. I go and I pick up the junker drag truck on a trailer and I start towing. And this thing, it feels like the bumper is dragging, even though it's just like a little trailer because the Ram 1500 didn't have the suspension. But that's besides the point. I'm sitting there just hot rodding this thing, just trying to basically maintain speed. It ends up losing power where it can't maintain speed. The catalytic converter plugs up on it. It only had 100,000 miles on it, but it's been putted around, daily driven, by my father-in-law, who was a little bit older at the time. And so he used it to haul yard waste and pick up something from the hardware store once in a while. It was not a daily driver for him. Anyway, ended up getting stranded. The truck died and it couldn't even pull like its own weight up to the speed limit and pull it over. And so I street drove the junker drag truck in Texas in the middle of the night with no headlights to the freaking NHRDA World Finals. And Todd was
To the
involved
event.
to the event. Street drove it to the event, and Todd was following me in a rental car, but I had no speedometer.
Yeah.
Maybe I had headlights, but no speedometer. And so he had to kind of like pace me. But man, it's really tempting out on those Texas highways.
Oh, they're long.
In your
and
race
wide.
truck that'll run like, low 10-second quarter miles. You're like, man, I just really want to open this up, I'm on the highway here and, when in Texas, but anyway, we made it to the event by leaving the gas truck, broke down on the side of the road with the
tow truck.
with the trailer.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, so my one experience with a gas tow truck pulling what I would consider a moderate load was not good. Would that happen to any gas vehicle? No. But truth of the matter is the diesel, I probably could have, if I had a tow hitch on the race truck, it probably would have towed the tow truck right to the event just fine.
No problem.
Now, the killer for this story is that you thought your engine was about to blow up. So you had friends from Cedar come all the way down to Texas to save you and your tow truck. When in fact,
so they had to pull
a
a good
set of push rods in your race truck.
And I was too proud to look and see it was a broken push rod.
You open that valve cover here and see it, and you're like, "Oh my!" It's
Like I wasted.
I wouldn't have told him.
I wasted hundreds of dollars in fuel by having people come, maybe even $1,000 in fuel. It was
And
sure.
time and everything. Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
Yeah, it was a rough trip. We've had a few of those, but since then we've
not
actually
to Texas.
not Texas. Yeah, since then we've
Baron, we love you, man. You and your wife
saved
me with
the
the Ford.
day.
That's my first time towing to the Ford Power Stroke, though.
Yeah.
Was when I was rescued by 2 Ford Power Strokes,
They did great.
6 liters.
They did
And
great.
you know what? Because it had a factory exhaust brake, it actually towed better than my 12 did. That exhaust brake was nice. That nice interior, a little bigger for my family.
Like this is I understand this a little more.
I had my family in tow, by the way, when I did this. You imagine breaking down the side of the road with your family in tow?
Oh yeah,
It was rough.
Do tell.
So man, I don't know what else is back to basics. Obviously, diesels are just better. The turbo gas engines are fun, and they've come a long
cool.
way, and they have a purpose.
I want to speaking of back to basics, we kind of talked about turbos. Another awesome thing about diesels and turbos is it is a match made in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Because on a gas engine, you have a throttle blade. So that throttle blade is trying to get it to where there's a vacuum. It's controlling the air going into the gas engine. Now you're strapping a turbo to that, and the turbo's job is to push more air into the engine. So now you have a turbo trying to push more in. You got a throttle blade that's working. Now, obviously, you floor it, and that blade opens, and the turbo's able to just shove the air in. But cruising around and stuff, you're trying to control the amount of air going in there's a turbo trying to push on it. And so, when you start turboing a diesel engine, there's a wastegate line, and a lot of people think that wastegate line is like a vacuum reference line to be able to control the turbo. No, in a diesel, we want as much air, as much boost that turbo can throw into the engine as possible. The leaner that engine is, perfect. The only thing that wastegate line's there for is to A, keep the turbo alive so it doesn't overspin, but B, sometimes you want to build a slightly gate here and there. Like if you have a tow truck, like if we have Vindy, we did that towing testing at 500 and call it 500 horse we were towing at. If we had tightened the gate all the way, on the dyno, we were losing power and we were making the EGTs a little bit higher. By just cracking that gate open a little bit, it was able to slow down the turbo, get the exhaust out, and it was able to pick up power and EGT control.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to use it for that type of application, just to help control the turbo, keep it in the happy point. But your tow truck, you have 2 compound turbos on it, not a single gate on it.
Right.
And it's self-regulating. When the engine puts more, or when the ECM or whatever puts more fuel in the engine, now you have higher EGTs, higher exhaust gas temperatures, which means more heat, more energy is then going into the turbo. The turbo takes that more energy and pushes more air into the engine again. And so it's like this self-regulating system. It's just like a match made in heaven.
Oh, it's so fun.
It works. It's incredible to me that it just works so well. I mean, just as a principle, let's just say if turbos were let's just say that right now a turbo is 60% efficient. If a turbo is 40% efficient, it won't really work very well.
Yeah.
It wouldn't. And so the fact that they just happened to get, and maybe that's just they had to do it, and so it was forced, but they just happened to be, that 60 whatever % efficient to where they work phenomenal.
Yeah. And what you're just saying is, we've said it before this podcast, it's so fun, but I've seen that exact cycle happen hundreds of times when I'm towing a trailer. I'll be going up a trailer on flat ground, I'll hit a pretty steep grade, and I'll give it some more throttle. If either the cruise control or by myself, the more throttle, the heat will go up. Boost comes in, heat goes back down.
Yeah, anyone with compounds will be familiar with that. Single turbos, they just, I don't know if they operate faster or whatever it is, to where you don't really see that process happen as much.
Yeah.
You get a nice set of compounds where you got a big old atmosphere charger. It takes a little bit to spin it up. Yeah, you see the EGTs go up to, call it 1200, and then they'll come back down to 11. Didn't change, like boost goes up, EGTs come down, power stays the same.
And now the boost is going, we have the airflow, the turbos maintain it. So even though the temperature drops again, the mass flow is now happening, so you don't lose the boost.
Yeah.
So the heat gets them going and the mass flow keeps them running.
And this is unique with the diesel because there's no throttle blade. It hits a balancing act of how much exhaust energy is how much boost it can make. And it's wide open. So however much boost it makes is it's jamming it all in the engine, which then is making more exhaust energy. And so it finally hits a balancing point, and it just naturally balances every time.
In the words of all the geeks out there, equilibrium.
It's equilibrium.
That's right. I'm gonna help my daughter do physics homework. It's a word it's backing me now. So yes, we reach equilibrium right around 1,000 to 1,100 degrees, pulling this big old trailer up this big dang hill, just ripping about 650 horsepower. That's awesome.
Now we're kind of wrapping this up, but I did want one final thought.
All right.
As much as we love diesel, if you get into diesels that are from the 70s and early 80s, some of these Isuzus and stuff, they're terrible.
Yeah.
They aren't built well. I mean, not all of them, but most of them are not built well. So don't find a Ford Ranger with a 2.3 liter diesel from the 70s. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to buy this. Yeah. Like the injection pressure was low on those old things. So the fuel is not atomized well. And if they're naturally aspirated, like they don't burn well. They need boost to burn well. But on those old ones, if you add boost to them, they might not have the components to handle the power of the boost. So they're just kind of like they're just
better off dead.
They're just better off dead. Like just let them die. So if you're getting into anything, some of the early Ford, 6.9 indirect injection, they call them.
Chevy 6.5 IDI.
They're not great. With a turbo, they're much better. And I would say they're not worth like killing and leave it dead.
Some people are
they're still viable, but they're not nearly as potent. Not nearly as potent. What was I going to say? Potent. There we go. Not nearly as potent as modern diesels, but yeah, so if you want to play the old stuff, that's great if it's like fun, but some of these like antique tractors and stuff, like they're not like the end all be all in diesel. There have been a lot of modernizations in injection pressure and design and the cylinder heads and stuff that makes modern diesel substantially better than that early 70s and 80s stuff that just wasn't there. Some of the semi-truck stuff, I'm not as familiar with that. There was more technology going into semi-trucks and heavy duty. Yeah, and so I can't speak with authority on what year of those. I know in the late 80s, those PT pump 855 Cummins are actually a pretty decent engine. But yeah, don't get an old jalopy from the 70s and be like, Power Driven told me diesels are awesome. This thing sucks. That does suck.
Yeah, if you're looking for a fun diesel, definitely 89 and newer for the Cummins, but even 94 newer if you're asking me.
I mean, for our really astute viewers, let's pretend like everyone tells you how great electric cars are because you see all the stuff about Teslas, and then you buy a Chevy Leaf from the 90s. You're going to be sorely disappointed with your 30-mile range and your 50 horsepower electric box that shouldn't even be on the road. So if you're into electric cars, don't buy a Chevy Leaf if you want a Tesla.
Tesla performance.
If you're into diesels, don't buy a 70s diesel.
Yeah.
Get something, let's say 1990 and newer, and you'll probably be okay.
Yeah. Yep. So anyway, guys, I hope this was not over people's heads. I hope we got our good lessons. I don't know, just information.
Basics. We went back to basics.
I hope it's basic enough. We understand why we like the diesels, why we think they're better. But still, really, I like the gas ones that are turbo, and I still think diesel's better, but the turbos are definitely making gasolines way more fun.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, we're down for comments, for suggestions. Let us know what you like. Give us a thumbs up, comment. Please subscribe. Help this channel grow. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next time on the Power Driven Podcast.
Thanks.